Good evening and welcome to the Monday, January 23rd session of the City of Tuscaloosa Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm Rob Stewart. I'm serving as the Vice Chairman of the ZBA, and I'll start with to my left. If I could have everyone introduce themselves.
Tim Gillum.
Michelle Coley.
Paul Rollins Jr.
And I would like to introduce the city staff who's here with us this evening, starting with Miss Emily Hayes, our Neighborhood Resources Coordinator, Mr. Otto Tumakamo, Deputy City Attorney, Mr. Mike Gardner, Associate City Engineer, Mr. Jonathan Bowen, Planner, and in the back of the room, Mr. Kevin Jones, with our audio-video, and Miss Angie Terrells, Administrative Assistant. Okay. The Board of Adjustment does not have the authority to enact zoning laws or special exception, nor does the board have authority to rule on claims of equal protection of the law or fairness or unfairness of any zoning ordinance. By virtue of state law and city ordinances, the purpose of the ZBA is as follows. Hear appeals from decisions of the zoning officer of the city, grant special exceptions to zoning code in accordance with the terms as established by the city council, grant variances from the terms of the zoning code when owing to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the code would result in unnecessary hardship. And so the spirit of the zoning ordinance can be observed and substantial justice done. It may be helpful for the petitioner and the public to understand that in regard to what an unnecessary hardship is, no one factor determines what is an unnecessary hardship, but all relevant factors, when taken together, must indicate that the plight of the premises in question is unique in that it cannot be put reasonably to a conforming use because of the limitations imposed upon it by reason of its classification in a specified zone. Variances should be granted sparingly and only under unusual and exceptional circumstances when a literal enforcement of an ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The reason for granting a variance must be substantial, serious, and compelling. Circumstances that are typically not hardships are self-inflicted or self-created, an inconvenience, or just simply personal by nature. A variance may not be granted where the property owner merely suffers a financial loss of a kind that is common to all of the property owners in the use district. Loss of future rent that is common to all property owners similarly situated is not an unnecessary hardship for a variance to be granted. The main question is whether, due to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. A working definition of an unnecessary hardship is as follows. The property cannot be put to any reasonable use under the current zoning classification. It must be a unique and peculiar difficulty relating to the property of a serious and significant nature. And it must relate to the property and not the personal issues which include economic or financial gain or loss. The Zoning Board of Adjustment, by virtue of state law and City of Tuscaloosa ordinance, does not have the jurisdiction or authority to consider, interpret, and or enforce any term or condition of subdivision covenants and or HOA rules or regulations. These matters are therefore not relevant areas of inquiry by the board on any petition. Such covenants or regulations are between the private parties involved and not the ZBA. That having been said, any decision made by the ZBA on any particular case does not necessarily preclude the enforcement of such subdivision covenants and/or HOA rules or regulations by other lawful means. You may have noticed when you came in at the back, in the hallway, at the door to the room, there's petitions were there. If you wish to speak on any matter before the board this evening, either for or against an item, and you are not the property owner, petitioner, or designated agent, staff has been notified of your request, and you will have the opportunity to speak during the requested agenda item. This is a public meeting. It is being recorded, videotaped, and is streaming live on the city's website, Facebook, and as well as on local cable TV. Proper decorum, civility, and respect for others is required at all times. When you are at the podium, please speak directly into the microphone and state your name and address for the record. All comments should be directed to the board. No questions or comments are to be directed to city staff. Any person wishing to speak on behalf of another person, group, or entity shall provide written authorization to the chairperson from the person, group, or entity being represented. Immediate family members defined for this purpose as spouse, parent, or child do not have to provide such written authorization when speaking on behalf of another immediate family member. The board reserves the right to limit remarks and comments depending on relevancy, redundancy, petitions with lengthy sign-up sheets, and to preserve good order. I would ask city staff to confirm for the record that all the appropriate and required public and individual property owner notices for each case upon the docket of petitions now before the board has been made in accordance with the law.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. The following procedures will be followed for each petition. This hearing is an opportunity for the petitioner to present their case, for the public to inquire, make their views known about the petition, and for the board members to gather relevant facts before making its decision. City staff will introduce the petition and present facts and information to the board concerning the same. The petitioner or the petitioner's designated representative will be asked to make comments and answer questions from the board. The members of the public will then be offered an opportunity to make inquiries and comments. At the close of public comments, the petitioner will be asked to respond to the comments if necessary. The chair may then permit the public to respond, but only to any new issues raised by the petitioner in rebuttal. At the close of public comment, or once the board is satisfied it has received all relevant information on a petition, the chairman will close further comment or discussion, and the board will then discuss the matter and vote on the petition. Standing motion to approve in regard to every request in a petition requiring a vote by the board, there is standing motion to approve the request, thereby not necessitating a motion or second for each such matter. In response to said standing motion, the ZBA members, when polled by the chairman, may vote yes to approve the request or no to deny the request. The chair will read into the record as conditions upon standing motion to approve the request. 4 votes are required to approve any petition, not a simple majority of the board. The yard signs that are posted on the properties will be picked up by city staff this week, so please leave those there at the conclusion of the meeting. Pursuant to Alabama Code Section 11-52-81, 1975, any party aggrieved by any final judgment or decision of such Board of Zoning Adjustment may within 15 days thereafter appeal therefrom to the circuit court by filing with such board a written notice of appeal specifying the judgment or decision from which the appeal is taken. In case of such appeal, such board shall cause a transcript of the proceedings and the action to be certified to the court to which the appeal is taken, and the action in such court shall be tried de novo. If the petition has not already been continued prior to the mailing of notifications to surrounding property owners, it may only be continued if the petitioner or the representative of the petitioner appears at the hearing in person to request a continuance. If the petitioner or representative of the petitioner fails to appear at a hearing, the case will not be docketed for a later meeting until the petitioner has paid an additional filing fee. Continuances are for 1 month. The board may, on its own motion, continue a hearing. The board members have had a chance to review tonight's agenda items. Do any of the members have a conflict of interest with any of the cases on tonight's agenda?
No.
No. Mrs. Hayes, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. And the minutes, Ms. Hayes?
It's for the May 2022 and December 2022 meetings.
Okay. Have all the members had a chance to review the minutes from the 2 meetings?
Yes.
Are there any changes for the record?
No.
Okay. If I could get a motion,
So moved?
Second.
all those in favor of approving the May 2022 and December 2022 minutes, starting with Mr. Gilliam?
Agree.
Yes.
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 Okay, the minutes are approved. Does the city attorney have anything to update?
Same as the previous few meetings, just one appeal. CV 2022-000089, ZF&E versus City of Tuscaloosa Zoning Board of Adjustment. That is set for a bench trial. That's the appeal of the bed and breakfast at Wood Manor.
Is there a date? Has it been docketed?
There's no date. There's
Okay.
no trial date or anything set.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is very brief this month. This month was just to ensure that everything stays on track. And so the last meeting was just kind of a summary of where we started, where we are, and where we're moving. So if y'all get a chance to look over that, if you haven't already, highly suggest it. But our next in-person meeting is going to be February 1st. They're going to discuss the development standards, neighborhood compatibility, open space and landscape, as well as form and design. So ZBA 0323 was withdrawn by staff, and we do have one case requesting to be continued. It's ZBA 0123, and the petitioner is here to request that continuance.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Kim Roberts with Bama Vacation Rentals, and I'm representing Elizabeth and Kramer Mize.
Ms. Roberts, would you mind stating your address, please?
My business address
Yeah,
is
sorry.
13752 West Lake Drive,
Okay.
Tuscaloosa 35405.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I'm representing Elizabeth and Kramer Mize. Due to some unexpected holdups the owners need to resolve with the city staff, we feel it would be best to continue the case to next month. This will allow them time to resolve the issues that were brought to their attention.
No, those issues related to,
I think there's some construction and they have the wrong kind of permit, that they need to get a different kind of permit.
okay. And staff, everything is correct, Ms. Roberts has stated? Okay. All right. Are there any questions for Ms. Roberts?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I move that we continue this case.
Second.
Voting to continue, let me read this. ZBA-01-23, Bama B&B, Kim Roberts, petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 3308 University Boulevard East, Zone BR1, Council District 5, voting to continue, starting with Mr. Gilliam.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
The case will be continued for 1 month. Ms. Roberts, in the event there's any other issues unresolved, city staff will, in working with you, and then it'll have to come back before us if this petition does in fact come back. Okay, thank you. Ms. Hayes, or Mr. Bowen?
All right, get into cases to be heard. Next case is ZBA 223, Mavis Tire Supply, Nate Fuss. Petitions for a special exception to allow an automobile repair shop. This is at 8811 Highway 69 South, will be zoned BN in Council District 2. So here we have a good aerial map that shows the location of that property. It's down Highway 69 South, just south of the Jacks. And here we have a closer up aerial image that shows that Jacks just north. And here is the plat map, and you can see the image on your screen in red. It's a little bit smaller. They have recently undergone subdivision, annexation, and will be undergoing a rezoning application. Here is the lot that currently exists. And the applicable regulations for a special exception for an automobile repair shop. You see that primary as the equipment shall be entirely enclosed within a building. This request is very similar to the request you heard at the previous month for the Mavis over in the Towns area. The petitioner is requesting for a special exception to allow a Mavis Tire Supply. The primary business model is retail sale of tires, brakes, oil change, fluid replacement. Mavis does not perform any major engine work. You can see the employees will be between 7 and 10 people. That last bullet point has the hours of operation listed. The petitioner has stated that no work will be conducted outside the building and no parts or tires will be stored outside as well. They are proposing 30 parking spaces, which does meet their minimum parking requirement for this use. If approved, staff does recommend making this contingent upon the city council's approval of that rezoning. Like we mentioned earlier, this meeting is set for tomorrow, January 24th. Here is a proposed site plan just to give you an idea of what the location would look like. You can see, can't draw on the screen, but you can see they do have a shared access drive with the Jacks directly north of this property. They'll also be able to access off an access road that's currently being developed. They will not have any access off of Highway 69 South. So you can see the 8-bay facility. You have parking in the rear, parking in the front, and then those 2 access points to access the property. And here are those proposed elevations. So again, very similar to the application you saw last month. We did not receive any public comment for this application, and the petitioner is here to answer any questions in person.
So could you go back to the proposed site plan, please? Okay, so the road to at the top of the drawing or to the east, the rear access, that, I know they're building those out as these properties develop, so that'll be a city street?
Correct.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, that street will have to be constructed and the final subdivision plat recorded before the land can be transferred to this developer.
So each lot to the south, as it develops, that'll be the requirement to move to the next intersection.
Well, what we have under review at our office now as far as construction documents is one developer extending the road all the way from its terminus there at Tractor Supply or Jack's down to Bobby Miller Parkway.
Okay.
So it'll all get constructed at one time. That will
And-
provide the access for the Mavis Tire to get to Bobby Miller Parkway.
Okay, and then, I know you can't speak for AlDOT, but obviously they're not going to allow an egress off of Highway 69.
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
would that probably be the same for the additional lots
Yes,
as
sir.
well?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Good. Thank you. Mr. Fuss?
Good evening. Nathan Fuss. My address is 211 Perimeter Center Parkway. I think that was a pretty good summary. Here to answer any questions that you may have.
As Mr. Bowen stated earlier, you came for another location, similar in design, new build, a month ago.
Yep.
What, if anything, as far as the hours of operation, overall operation of the business that was in the packet has changed from that location?
It'll be the exact same. This building is slightly different. The other one had 4 bays on either side. This one just has 8 bays. It'll be facing Highway 69. Hours of operation will be the same, same number of employees. We do ask to not put a condition of overnight storage of vehicles because, you know, there is the customer that may drop their car off overnight that will be serviced in the morning, but no work outside of the building. All work will be done indoors, no storage of tires or any materials outside the building.
If an overnight condition was not put in place, where would those individuals park their vehicles?
Probably behind the building. I mean, wherever there's space, there wouldn't be we could add signage if it was requested they'd be behind the building, but you know, it'd be up to the discretion of the customer.
How often would you say that occurs in a normal business day or week?
Not very often. It's only for if there's, you know, an 8 o'clock appointment and somebody's got to be somewhere the next day. It might happen, you know, not very often. I can't speak to exactly, but you know, most of the transactions will be, you know, through the day, and not many people that are going to park overnight.
And did I recall correctly that it's by appointment only, or is that?
Not only, but that's the majority. The majority of the you know, the services are done by appointment. But there is a small waiting room that you know, can accompany any customers that do want same day service.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Fuss?
How many parking spaces are shown in the back? Is that rendering correct?
We just submitted recent plans that show 18 spaces in the back, so one less than is shown here. But
And that's your dumpster at the end of the rear parking lot?
yep,
And I assume your stormwater, this is going to have an actual pond? It's not going to be underground detention?
so we did just submit plans the other week. We will be having utilizing that above ground pond in the to the rear of the site, and there will also be an underground system in the front of the site. Just with how the topography of the site worked, we had to use an underground basin in the front and then a storage pond in the back.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak either for or against. Is there anyone in the audience at this time who would like to come forward to speak? No? Okay, if that being the case, we're going to go ahead and close public comment and move to board discussion, starting with Mr. Gilliam.
I know we did put that stipulation on the one of the towns, and their request not to have that. Maybe we don't do it here and have them park behind the building since they have that option on this location. Or not do it at all. I mean,
So I'm in favor of this. I kind of want to keep it consistent in terms of what we said for the towns. I would like to see it happen on 69. They had the same option where you could park in different places, and we still said we didn't want to see vehicles parked overnight, so I don't know why we would want to change it. I do understand that they do have it behind the building, which makes it not visible from the road, but I just feel like you could lend yourself to having cars stacked up. A lot of times people tell us they're not going to do that, and then you start passing by and you start seeing it, and I think that's the thing that people don't want in their community, just bunches and bunches of cars stacked up. So I'm in favor of it, but I would like to stick with the no overnight parking.
Ms. Hayes, if I could ask a question, what specific in this, with the exception for the BN, how does it address parking? Overnight parking in this case?
So there is a limitation in the code in which it says no more than 2 weeks in which you can have the vehicle sitting outside. Now, that is more so focusing on wrecked or dismantled vehicles. It's not necessarily cars that are perfectly functional.
But for the full service, mechanic type work or body shops, do they have to be, can they be in line of sight to the street, or they have to be behind fencing, or how does that work for those? Or
It-
is there?
It doesn't necessarily, now, if it was something that was near a residential area, there would be buffering standards that are required. But for something like this that's in a commercial area, there wouldn't be.
Thank you. I get the request of the petitioner to not do that. Obviously, we did. There were a lot more concerns. More residential was close. This is a major thoroughfare. I think it's 6-lane highway, with turn lanes and the divided highway in front. But we don't know what's potentially going to be built to the east. I think that's still undeveloped. Is that right? This is a commercial corridor. Obviously, everything on the frontage will be neighbor and commercial. I think with it's not being required by the code and it's less sensitive to what's around it, if there was some condition that we could put on, perhaps any overnight parking, only the requirement for the petitioner would, or your agent, who you represent, would be behind the building, not in front where it's highway frontage, because it will be a service road on the just past the storage pond or a city street at some point. And I think we could probably live with that based on what the specifics of the code allowing cars there.
That'd be acceptable. So it'd be just a restriction saying that any overnight parking just has to be behind the building?
Yes, if the board does put that stipulation on there, it would have to be in the back.
Okay, yeah, that's something we can work with. And then also, as Emily was saying, the wrecked storage cars was 2 weeks. If you had to put a condition that it could only be there for a week or, whatever, we'd be okay with that as well.
Yeah, anything, again, based on what you said, you can park, if you have a car that stays, you have 8 bays.
Yep.
I believe it's what you stated last month.
Yep,
You would have anything that stayed secured inside the bay, door closed.
yep,
Obviously, that's preferable. But if it was a customer dropping a vehicle, those 8 cars that would stay longer than a day or two, they need to be inside.
okay, yep,
This is specifically for a customer dropping off because they can't make it in the morning, their vehicle's there. That would be what we would allow in the rear of the building.
okay. Yep, that'd be acceptable. We can agree to that.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I have.
I'm in favor of granting a special exception with the agreed upon conditions with the petitioner, with the parking bin on the rear.
I'm also in favor of this petition. I work down Highway 69, so to see development coming is great. I also agree that I do think the parking should be on the back of the building. I think the difference is this is a commercial area, so I'm in favor.
Okay, are there any other comments?
Probably would like to keep it from a week instead of 2, and he's willing to do that as well.
Okay, a maximum of a week parking there. Again, and you don't need to come forward, Mr. Fuss. As was stated a month ago, the 8 bays, if someone's leaving a vehicle, they need to be inside.
Correct.
And then if there's someone coming after hours, is the exception at the rear of the building. Is that
Yes.
reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no more comments, we're going to move towards a vote. ZBA-02-223, Mavis Tire Supply LLC, Nate Fuss, petitions for a special exception to allow an automobile repair shop on the property located at 8811 Highway 69 South, Zone BN, Council District 2, with the condition that any vehicle, customer-dropped vehicle after hours would be parked, and if it's not inside, obviously after hours, parked in the rear of the building. Voting with Mr. Gilliam.
Yes.
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 Petition passed.
Okay, moving on to ZBA 0423, Al Cavanagh petitions for a variance from the University Residential District regulations and a special exception from the off-street parking regulations on the property located at 808 Gene Stallings Avenue, zoned RMF 2U, Council District 4. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning. This property is going to become very familiar as soon as I show you this picture. So this is looking south down Gene Stallings. The property is right here on the right. And then just north, just to give you some view of the streetscape. The applicable regulations, section 24-223 is the University Residential District, residential regulations. So specifically what we're gonna focus on is the applicable site elements. The sidewalks shall be installed along all street frontages, and for properties zoned within this zoning, which is RMF 2U, any properties west of Gene Stallings, which is where this property falls, it requires a 5-foot landscape strip between the street and the sidewalk, and states the landscape strip shall be grass, landscaping, or trees, and shall incorporate the provisions of the right-of-way landscape requirements. For townhouses specifically, because this is a townhouse development, it requires a 7-foot side yard at the end of each row, as well as for the setbacks to be front yard setbacks of 10 feet, and for corner lots, which this one is, the front yard abutting a secondary street shall be 5 feet. The proposed development includes 7 townhomes with 5 bedrooms in each. The petitioner was able to revise the drawings after we submitted the legal notice, so that's why it still has that special exception for parking on there, but they no longer need it. They were able to meet those 36 parking spaces when they only needed 35. The petitioner is proposing to construct 3 additional spaces in the public right-of-way along 8th Street. They are requesting a variance from the front setbacks along Gene Stallings Avenue, which is the primary street, due to the narrow right-of-way along this portion of the road, which prohibits the development from conforming to the code that requires that 5-foot landscape strip. They do propose to dedicate 4 feet of right-of-way and build a 2-foot landscape strip and a 7-foot sidewalk. However, in order to do this, they need those front setbacks to be reduced to 6 feet. This will provide ample room for landscaping as well as construction of a standard sidewalk, therefore ensuring public safety is maintained. And within this area, the minimum sidewalk is 4 feet, so the fact that they are constructing 7 feet is much larger than that. So here's a site plan. This is very zoomed out, so you can kind of see exactly what is happening here, and then just a closer view. So you can see that 4-foot right-of-way dedication, the 2-foot landscape strip, and then that 7-foot sidewalk. Do y'all have any questions for staff?
So the 2-foot, that's where they're showing the 4 trays or 5 trays on the front.
So it is going to perfectly match the development that is going across the street. They wanted it to be very symmetrical so that the view as you're looking down Gene Stallings is very clean.
So because of the code, the east side had the larger requirement.
So they don't have to have that 5-foot landscape strip the way that the west side does.
Okay.
So this is on the west. It usually requires that 5-foot landscape strip, and it just wouldn't provide very much ample room for a nice-sized sidewalk. Okay. And so with this, they're going to dedicate that right-of-way, have a 2-foot landscape strip, and a wider sidewalk for that public safety.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Petitioner is here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Al Cabinets with Cabinets Engineering, representing Hampton Callahan and Gary Smith, both of whom are here in the audience tonight. You know, Emily does such a good job of presenting these, it doesn't leave us a whole lot to do. Let me talk briefly about the development to the east. We're actually permitted and are under construction with that. I think you can see the buildings were framed in the photo. Gene Stallings is the dividing line where east of Gene Stallings, you get the sidewalk all the way to the back of the curb with the trees planted in planters just like that on the sidewalk here. West of Gene Stallings is where you pick up the landscape strip. I think, well, I'm sure I was on the UAN committee that we talked about all that. You think about west of a street or east of a street, but in this, when you really look at how it's written, one side of the street has a slightly different requirement than the other. This development Mr. Callahan's doing, it's going to match the townhomes across the street. So you get a streetscape where you see townhomes, 3 stories are not imposing. We're about half density on this development and on the density on the development across the street. So for the area where low density, you get that streetscape, the kind of brownstone feel. The sidewalk on the east side of the project under construction is a 7-foot wide sidewalk with trees spaced no further than 50 feet apart. You wind up with about 40, 45-foot spacing. So on this side, we've matched the tree spacing, and the trees are in that 2-foot landscape strip. So as you drive down the street, each side of the street will appear symmetrical. And of course, the building facades will be virtually the same too. So it'll look like it's supposed to be there. The project across the street did not require variance. The street was not centered exactly in the right-of-way, so we had room to get everything to fit over there. On this side, when we got into the pre-design conference, this is when the different sidewalk cross-section requirement is why we need the variance for this street. Gene Stallings, you may can read that text, has a 30-foot street right-of-way. These lots are actually in an old subdivision recorded in the 40s. Of course, the zoning ordinance came along about 1970, so the subdivider couldn't really have anticipated the current needs for a street width that happened in 1970 or a landscaping requirement that happened in the early 2000s. So we can develop the property. It actually does work for parking dimensions and building dimensions that are functional. If we give up right of way and then lose building setback, that's when we have a hardship because our site can't conform, and we can't fix that. We can't come up with more property anywhere. So, but we've worked with staff, and what we've got is a sidewalk that matches on both sides of the street, so it looks like it belongs there. The setbacks, as Emily said, in this zone, 10 feet minimum. If you're on a corner lot, one of the streets is 5, the other's 10. The development across the street, we're actually using the 5-foot setback on the Gene Stallings frontage. On this side, so we're asking for a 6-foot setback, so more than the 5, less than the 10. And that gets us where we can develop this property with dimensions that the townhomes work for modern requirements and that the parking meets modern requirements as well. So we're within the parameters of the zoning. We just are, on this particular piece of property, imposing those new codes to a 1940s development just left us a few feet shy. We are also doing that. We meet parking on the street, but I don't think I'm on here. We can. Okay. So yeah, right up at the northeast corner there, you see the 2 trees at the intersection of 8th and Gene Stallings, little island there. Mr. Gardner, Associate City Engineer, we've talked about doing this. It's not a requirement, something that Mike and I worked out that we agreed to do. If you travel east on 8th Street, it's one way. It's one of those areas where the parking's not just on the north or on the south. It varies as you drive through there. I'm not sure why it's that way, but it does work as a traffic calming device, which is probably a good thing. But when you get to the eastern end of this, if you look on the aerial photo, the way you're changing sides of the road, the way the stripes are, it almost encourages you to turn south, which would be the wrong way. So Mike saw this as an opportunity for us to fix this, and the owners are willing to do this. So we're creating a curb island there that will direct traffic in the direction it's supposed to go. There are some striped spaces on the street. We're improving those in a parking bay, so the cars will be more protected and traffic will be encouraged to go the correct way rather than turning the wrong way. It'd be very difficult to turn south on 8th Street after we develop this. The small dashed lines in there are the route of a fire truck. We worked with fire on the routing of a fire truck through there. So that's what that part of that development is about. But the hardship is if we lose property to comply with the sidewalk, we don't have enough property to develop a functional development now. I probably rambled long enough, but I'll answer any questions you have.
Mr. Cabanis, you stated the 3 on-street parks that are being improved, and then the corner, which I think is a huge safety issue. I know Mr. Gardner is in favor of that. Because like you said, you're zigzagging on 8th Street on which side parking's allowed, being a one-way, and a lot of folks don't know that it's a one-way as it's set up today.
Yeah.
And
yes, when you get to we could expand out a little bit. It is a 4-way intersection, but it's so greatly offset it appears to be just a 3-way as you approach it. And yes, it's an awkward situation. It lets us, it improves, not just doing a city improvement, it improves the appearance of our site. We get some landscaping out there, so it's a win for us and the city. I think it helps everyone.
any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. We do not have anyone signed up to speak on this petition. Is there anyone in the audience at this time who would like to come forward and speak either for or against? No, we will, at this point, close public discussion and move to board comments. Mr. Gilliam?
It looks like he's matching the other side with having a 7-foot sidewalk, and he's gonna match the tree spacing. I don't really see an issue there. He's matching what's already there.
I'm in favor of granting the special exception for the 6-foot setbacks. I like that you're being conscious of the streetscape and improving the property beyond what is being required, especially with the street, and making sure the off-street parking is something that you didn't have to do, so I appreciate that.
And just for clarification, we went from a special exception on the parking, which we no longer need. The petitioners met that. And so it's a requesting a variance from the front setback in the 5-foot landscape strip. Okay. Could you go to the street view of the property? If nothing else, this property has probably seen its better day. It is kind of the odd one of the few odd buildings out where that hasn't been fully redeveloped. So I think it's going to be a good addition. From the hardship, I do agree with the petitioner's statement. This was platted, I think, the subdivision in the 40s. Obviously, it didn't at all anticipate at the time lacking zoning, widths, setbacks in relation to what we're facing today, and then the enhanced code with the sidewalk requirements and the landscape buffer. This gives it a harmonious look, because it is disjointed as you travel this up and down Gene Stallings. Is that right, or Red Drew? Yeah, Gene Stallings. When you go down from Bryant Drive, going down all the redevelopment, it's still kind of a hodgepodge. I think this will help that. And this is a high pedestrian. On top of that, from safety, it'll be an improved pedestrian travel, because this is promoted because of density. A lot of college kids and game day visitors here. And then also on the corner, I think that's a huge safety improvement at the petitioner's expense, the developer's expense, to fix that, so it will hopefully eliminate folks coming eastbound on 8th, taking a right inadvertently on the one-way. So all that being said, I am in favor of granting the variance.
I agree with my other board members. I'm in favor.
I also agree with my fellow board members. I agree.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we will move to a vote. ZBA-04-23, Al Cabanis petitions for a variance from the University Residential District sidewalk regulations on the property located at 808 Gene Stallings Avenue, zoned RMF 2U, Council District 4, voting with Mr. Gilliam.
Yes, I'm in favor.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
petition passed.
All right, last case is ZBA 523. Clay Hudson petitions for a variance from the accessory dwelling unit size regulations. This is on various properties off of 30th Avenue East and 31st Avenue East. Zoning is RD2 in Council District 5. So again, here's a map showing generally where the property is located. It's out in the Alberta area, right next to the Elements development. You can see that to the west. These are multiple properties being discussed. Currently, they are vacant lots. We have several images showing the lay of the land. This is a view from 30th Avenue. And here we have some drone photos. This is from 2021. We have a couple of angles that show what the land looks like. You can see the elements directly adjacent to this property. So the applicable regulations for the detached house and accessory unit, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, the building footprint maximum is 450 square feet. This petitioner is requesting to develop 15 lots, each featuring a 2-bedroom single-family dwelling and a 1-bedroom detached accessory dwelling in the rear. In the RD2 zone, accessory dwelling units are permitted by right. However, like we just saw, they're limited to 450 square feet. This request is to construct 650 square foot accessory units on each lot. So the petitioner has stated that the 450 square foot is just not functional for a 1-bedroom unit. This proposal, or an identical proposal, was presented to the zoning board in October of 2021. It was approved as presented. The approval has expired, so the petitioner is back before you asking for reapproval. Here we have the proposed typical lot layout. You can see the single-family home in the front, and then you have that accessory dwelling unit to the side. This is the proposed typical floor plan just for the accessory dwelling unit. And then here we have an overall site plan. We have not received any comments in support or opposition to this application, and the petitioner is here to answer any questions in person.
When the October 2021 petition was passed, have there been any changes from what's presented today?
To my knowledge, there have been.
Sorry, can you say that again?
What we approved in 2021, October of 2021, has anything in the current petition changed from what we approved?
Nothing has changed.
Okay.
It's the exact same petition.
And then in RD2, where this accessory structure is allowed, a second structure on a single-family lot,
Correct, the single-family detached.
is that the only zoning in the city that allows that?
So the residential attached District 1 also allows this. I believe the residential attached District 2 does as well. I just know that the RD1 district doesn't.
Okay, and of those two classifications, has anyone built anything like, so this will be the first?
This will be the first. We don't have anything like this in the city.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you. Oh, are there any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name's Clay Hudson. My address is 3507 Veterans Memorial Parkway. I appreciate you guys hearing. I'm sorry I'm back up here, but I had a knee replacement and wasn't able to begin last year, so I'm just simply requesting the same variance that you granted in 21.
Mr. Gardner, you had a couple of comments I know you wanted to make.
Yeah, one of the concerns that I have is the increase in square footage of the footprint is going to change the amount of impervious area on the lot. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm not in favor really of what this zoning allows, but irregardless, I see a potential for some issues with increased runoff from these units with the extended driveways. Basically, we're putting, I know they're once called an accessory dwelling, but we got 2 dwellings on one lot. We've got a lot of ground coverage ratio. Because this petition is granting basically a 44% increase in impervious area, and that doesn't even count the covered porch. I would like to see each one of these applications for a building permit have an LDP that our office can review to address any concerns with stormwater runoff particularly.
And just for everyone's benefit, in the stormwater runoff through the LDP process, explain to everyone who may not know what that will entail.
Anytime that you change a grass surface to an impervious surface, we have an increase in runoff. And sometimes the magnitude of that can cause issues to the downstream property owners or the downstream infrastructure that accepts this additional runoff. This requirement for a land development permit is not required for a single-family home. In other words, we do not require an LDP for that. I think this is a little bit of a unique situation. If you look in our land development permit requirements, there is a section called a minimal LDP. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm not quite concerned with some of the other nuts and bolts that we look at on land development permits, but I'm very interested in how the runoff on these lots as they're developed is going to be addressed.
So through the LDP process, when you look at the issues around the runoff and the drainage, the consulting engineer's report is something that city staff would look at. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The engineer will provide us a pre-development runoff volume and a post-development runoff volume, and then based on his professional opinion, is this something that needs to be addressed with some form of either a velocity reducing measure or even maybe a volume reduction measure.
And that would lead to potentially no extra action perhaps on the petitioner if that passed to y'all's satisfaction?
That's correct, yeah.
Or then again, it may need to be mitigated in some way.
Right. That's correct,
Pre-construct,
yeah.
or part of that construction permitting.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay. Were there any other concerns related to this petition from your purview?
No, I understand that the sewer connections, let me say this, there's only going to be one landowner. Even though there's two units on here and two homeowners, there's only one landowner. So any utilities like a water meter or sewer line connection, from the city's perspective, we're only looking at that one owner entity that owns the land for any issues that might come up.
Okay, thank you. You've heard what Mr. Gardner had to say.
I have. May I make a comment?
Yes, yeah.
Mr. Garner, and just to understand, if I was to build 2 single-family houses, each with their own driveway, with a 450 square foot impervious area, this would actually be less than sharing one driveway and increasing the square footage by 200 feet on each lot if they were developed individually, and that was actually a goal when we looked at putting cottage courts on here, we realized how much that we would have to do, so we reduced those footprints and impervious areas to meet the code or the ordinance that we were working with. To go all the way back through to do an LDP process, if that logic makes sense, you know, would probably cancel this project this season.
I didn't quite follow what you said. You're up here asking to increase the square footage of the accessory dwelling.
But
And that's a benefit to you. And in doing so, I see it as an issue that the city may have to address. What's the solution with all this increase in runoff?
I guess I was just simply saying the efficiency of one driveway rather than having two homes with a driveway to the rear which wouldn't require an LDP process. This would actually be less of an impact than that would have done.
Well, if what you're saying is correct, then the land development permit should be able to address that, and then it becomes a non-issue. If what you're saying is, you're saying that I can't draw on this and they see it?
You can, just that one.
Okay. I think what you're trying to tell me, Mr. Hudson, is that this single driveway serving these 4 residences is less impervious area than if you had an individual driveway here and another individual driveway here. Is that what I understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so my reply to that is that may be the solution to the increase in runoff that I'm concerned about.
I will get with my engineers and run the calculations for both, and I think I understand what you're saying, but I'll show it to you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Just so we're all clear, Mr. Gardner, what Mr. Hudson has just suggested with showing that from his consulting engineer, is that something, looking at that from what you stated earlier, you want that through an LDP, requesting that as far as their opinion, or is there something through other means to achieve that before this goes to that next state as far as construction?
I would like the opportunity to look at at least 1 or 2 LDPs. And if there's a consistent pattern that what he says is relieving my concerns about the increase in runoff, then I'd be willing to say, okay, we don't need to continue to get LDPs. But I still see the magnitude of this, and in my opinion, I just feel like there's a little bit of concern.
Ms. Hayes, if we get to this point, we're getting close. The petition, it's one common owner, Mr. Hudson. This petition covers multiple parcels in here. So without knowing which ones to pick, if we were to do that on a sampling of these, what's the mechanism to do that?
Do you anticipate starting all these pretty close to the same time?
No, we'll be doing about 4 at a time.
Okay.
Is it possible that we can meet and just look at meet privately rather than going through a whole LDP process to evaluate it before we go to that point? Even just simply through impervious area calculations.
Are you willing to continue this for a month to do that?
It's not ideal, but if that makes you feel more comfortable, I feel like we went through this with TTL in the city before, and we reduced the density, and we ended up going with the zoning without an LDP process to already accomplish this goal. And I feel like we're going back to another requirement that wasn't required in the first place. And with respect to you, I understand your concerns. I feel like a conversation. I don't know how you do this through this process, but I feel like we're kind of going full circle back to where we were, 2 years ago. We're asking to pull a permit to build 2 lots, which is 4 dwelling units immediately. if we want to restrict the request for the others at this time, I can come back here to do that within our timelines to accomplish this build out to be done by July. With two lots being developed, and I don't even know if I can make that change tonight, but I just,
So what you're asking for is approval to do 2 lots, 4 units now with, give you time to A, get started, and B, to meet with Mr. Garner on that. I'm asking, is that right? Is that what you-
that's correct. I'd be asking for 421 and 419. I'm sorry. Yeah, it would be 421 and 419.
All right, so just so that everybody's clear, what you would approve tonight would be 420 and 419, is that what you said, or 421?
421 and 419. The addresses actually
All
are a
right.
little bit offset on this map.
And then you would bring the other addresses back at the next,
After we have our discussion.
yeah. Here's my concern. If we don't put this condition on this, in the vote tonight, then I lose any opportunity to evaluate this and try to protect the city's infrastructure and the surrounding residents. That's my concern.
Could we do it in the way of approved contingent on the city engineer's determination of the requirements? So that it's not specifically saying you have to have an LDP. If you have the conversation and the LDP doesn't happen, like, it just gives the city engineer full discretion to say yes or no. Not ZBA saying you have to have an LDP. It's just saying the city engineer gets to make that
For those
determination.
2 lots.
For all of them?
Here's the thing, the LDP is not even required in the zoning that I'm requesting. The concern that Mr. Garner's expressing is a runoff concern because there is no city storm sewer in this area. Is that right?
That's part of it, yes.
But there's no requirement for it now. In this zoning, you could build a deeper house. I could put 200 square feet on the main house, 200 square feet more, reduce the rear accessory structure, and it could be a shed, meet all the requirements with no LDP. So all I'm asking for is that, that we move forward with what TTL has already designed, and that I guess I'm a little confused at that. It seems like that if this is already in this zoning, how do we get here from the 12 years ago? I don't understand that part, but I understand the overall runoff issue. But that's, these structures can all be built without the LDP process in a different variation with more impervious area.
But there's a difference between a shed and a living dwelling. So when you say that you could add 200 feet to the single-family dwelling and then make it a shed, then that's totally different usage than having a house where somebody's going to live in at 650 square feet, and the usage and the traffic and all that that's going to be happening, that's the concern. And see, once you build and you leave, then what's left, if it becomes a problem and we don't deal with it in the beginning, you're done. And then that becomes a city issue. And that's something that affects the people around. So we have to be conscious of that from the beginning. I understand what you're saying. We want you to develop in that area. That what you're talking about doing sounds great, but we also have to be conscious on the front end of what will this do. This is a lot of density in this short space, small area. So I think that we have to talk about it and at least do our due diligence on the front end. We're not trying to slow your progress and your timeline, but that does not move us that you want to get it done by July. It's what is going to be the right thing and how can we both work together. So that's what we're trying to,
And just so we can remember why I was requesting for a two-bedroom house, smaller two-bedroom house with an accessory dwelling structure behind it. The original intent going from 450 to 650 was my concern of having a functional dwelling unit, not 450 of something that wouldn't be big enough for a couple.
Right.
And so that was the original intent of, by the time we got to this, was can we get this much more square footage to make something functional that would be good for the city? So,
and this housing is needed, so that we're all in agreement on that. It's just making sure that we can meet that part of, you don't want to damage the area. So that's what we got to look at, and how do we do that?
And to your point, both your points, when we approved this in October of '21, and that was the basis of the hardship on the variance, it's hard based on code to fit in a living structure that is not only marketable, but that would be of any use to satisfy the objective, for the density. So that, we've approved, we get that. Mr. Gardner's concerns are the impact, because even with the shed argument, you've still got more concrete for the extra structure than you would just for a single family with a shed and the square feet meeting out. You wouldn't go all the way back. So in that saying, I think we need to find, and help me, Ms. Hayes, and our legal staff as well, how we possibly could do something on 2 so you can start that we're okay with, and we would just continue or either come back, and I know, apologize, that's an inconvenience, but that hopefully, would that satisfy Mr. Gardner for at least 2? A condition on there where you have that review, what you're asking for that would come through an LDP.
Yeah, as long as I get that, I'm fine.
Are you wanting a full LDP, or are you wanting something from an engineering group, TTL, whoever, McGifford, whoever, showing the runoff?
Obviously, somebody's drawn this site plan, and I'm not trying to make extra work or spend, or have Mr. Hudson spend extra money. That's not the intent here. And that's why I mentioned the minimal LDP, segment of our regulations. I don't think I'm asking for a whole lot of additional work for TTL, who he said has already designed a fair amount here, and I'm not sure to what degree, but quite frankly, I'm just asking for somebody to tell me, what is the pre and post runoff going to be for 419 and 421? Where's that water going to go? When 503 gets built, is it going to block the flow of the water? Is this water going to pass through the middle of these lots? Is this water going to drain to the eastern end of those lots and then go down the common lot line of all the rear of the lots? I have no clue right now what that water's going to do. And quite frankly, if you start at the north end at 4th Street and you work yourself down, by the time you get down here to lot 504, you're going to have a reasonable amount of water to address.
What do you have from do you have something from TTL already?
I mean, we've already looked at, like, as far as I can show you where the water drains, but that's from my mouth. I mean, I'd like you to feel comfortable from the engineers and how we decided where the water naturally flows from the site and where it goes. And that's what I'm saying, is how do we get to that point without going through a full LDP process? How do we have this discussion on, like, some type of limited, I don't know what vehicle that looks like, but if you're asking for a full site plan of watershed movement with elevations, and I don't know how we would accomplish that without it turning into a different requirement and a different zoning, but.
So if you're not going that far, if you're not doing that in your planning phase, how can you tell me that when you develop 413, and then you do 421, and you've got a gap in the middle, how can you be certain that you're not going to cause a problem?
We'll have to balance those runoffs just like you would when you develop any
And that's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that. It's talking about where it sheds today and how we're going to prevent that. I mean, that's going to come down to grading the site. So I understand. And there's no curb and gutter on the side. There is on the opposite side of the street where the water all sheds southwest on this site. And that will have to be balanced.
Well, I know that.
Just as if we developed it lot by lot. That's what we'd have to do.
I'm going to recommend that whatever you approve tonight, whether it be 2 lots or 1 lot or all of it, that they have to get an LDP.
You've heard, Mr. Hudson, the concerns from the city. We're kind of at a little bit of an impasse here. For you to move on, just let me finish, as it's stated, without some assurance for the city. And that is for the best interest of not only your total development when it's completed, but obviously on infrastructure and the neighboring, as that water flows to the southwest, that can leave you, onto other properties. So, and I believe your properties also are to the southwest as well, the elements. In saying that, and I don't know, I know you've got your time frame, and I understand that, the importance of that, but I don't know if a continuance tonight would give there any resolution or time without a vote for the city and you, through your consulting engineer, perhaps, to discuss that? Or do you go piecemeal? We're willing to entertain that if that could maybe expedite a solution.
I would like to continue to have further discussion with Mr.
And then
Gardner.
from there, continuing, even if it's in a month, that's 30 days. We might be faced with this again, but that at least gives the heads to come together to talk about it.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Sound reasonable? Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Hudson this evening? No? Okay. Anything else?
Yes, sir.
Move for the continuance.
Oh, hold on just one moment. Okay, we do not have anybody signed up. I don't think you want to talk. Okay, no one else is coming forward at this point to weigh in or comment, so we will close public comment and go to board discussion. Anything else other than the continuance? Thoughts?
No, if he's willing to do a contingency to talk with Mr. Garner, I think that's a good plan.
Everybody good? Okay, if we could get a motion.
Move that is continued.
Second.
In the matter of ZBA 0523 Clayton Hudson petitions for a variance from the accessory dwelling unit size regulations on the properties located at 405, 407, 413, 419, 421, and 503 30th Avenue East, and 400, 408, 422, 426, 500, and 504 31st Avenue East, zoned RD2, Council District 5, to continue. Voting with Mr. Gilliam.
Yes.
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 Okay. To be continued. Is there any other business? Okay. In that case, we stand adjourned.